My name is Sarah Mitchell. I am 31 years old. 3 weeks ago, my sister-in-law stood up in front of our entire family and played a video on the living room television that she claimed proved I had been cheating on my husband. Everyone in that room watched it. Everyone believed it. And within minutes, my mother-in-law was screaming at my husband to sign divorce papers before the night was over. But before I tell you what my husband actually did, make sure to like and subscribe to Heartway Stories and drop your country in the comments below. I read every single one. Now let me tell you what really happened that night. It was the evening of my father-in-law's 65th birthday. My husband had spent weeks planning the celebration. He had reserved a private dining room at a restaurant his father loved, ordered a custom cake, and personally called every relative to make sure they could attend. It was the kind of effort that showed how much he loved his family. And I loved him for it. I had spent the afternoon getting ready, trying to look nice, trying to feel like I belonged. Because even after 3 years of marriage, walking into a room full of his family still made my stomach tighten in a way I could never fully explain. My husband came from money. Not the kind that people talk about quietly, the kind that was impossible to ignore. His family owned a regional chain of medical supply companies that his grandfather had built from nothing and his father had turned into something significant. They had a name in their community. They had expectations. And from the very beginning, I was never quite what they had in mind for their eldest son. I grew up in a small town in Ohio. My father worked in a factory for 30 years. My mother cleaned houses on the weekends to help pay my college tuition. I was the first person in my family to get a graduate degree. I became a registered nurse, and I was proud of that. I still am. But to my mother-in-law, my background was something to be managed rather than celebrated. She never said it directly. She was too careful for that. It was always the small things. A comment about how I set the table. A question about whether I was planning to move into something more professional than nursing. A suggestion, once, that I consider taking etiquette classes, said with a smile so practiced it almost felt like a compliment. My husband always defended me. Every single time. He would take my hand and say, quietly but firmly, that I was exactly who he chose and that was the end of the conversation. I loved him for that too. But love does not make a cold room warm. And his family had ways of making me feel cold even in the middle of summer. Still, I wanted to try. I always wanted to try. So that evening I put on a blue dress my husband said he loved, and I smiled the whole drive to the restaurant, and when we walked in and I saw the long table filled with people who had never fully accepted me, I smiled at them too. The dinner started beautifully. My father-in-law was genuinely happy. He laughed loudly at old stories, pulled my husband into a hug that lasted longer than usual, and even squeezed my hand when I handed him his gift. For a moment, it felt like one of those rare evenings where everything just works. My husband gave a toast. He talked about his father's strength, his integrity, the way he had taught him that a man's word was worth more than his bank account. People clapped. Some of the older relatives wiped their eyes. I felt genuinely moved. And then my sister-in-law asked if she could say a few words. Her name is Danielle. She is 2 years younger than my husband and has never, not once in 3 years, looked at me like I was a real person. She always looked at me like I was a problem she was waiting for someone else to solve. But that night she was smiling in a way I had never seen before. Wide, bright, patient. Like someone who had been holding something for a long time and was finally about to put it down. She stood up from her chair and said she had something she wanted to share with the family. She said it was important. She said she was sorry to bring it up at a celebration, but that she felt the family deserved to know the truth. My husband looked at her with mild confusion. I looked at her with the first real wave of unease I had felt all evening. She took out her phone, connected it to the small display screen the restaurant had set up for a slideshow of photos, and said, "I think everyone should see this." A video began to play. It showed a woman who looked like me, same hair, same general build, walking out of a hotel downtown with a man I had never seen in my life. The woman was laughing. The man had his arm around her shoulder. They paused near a car, and he leaned in close to her face. Then the video cut off. The table went completely silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. "That was taken 6 weeks ago," Danielle said. Her voice was calm in a way that felt rehearsed. "I have 2 more. And I have the name of the hotel, the date, the time." Someone at the table whispered something I couldn't make out. Someone else pushed their chair back slightly, like they were preparing for something. My mother-in-law's face had gone still in a way that frightened me. Not shocked. Still. Like she already knew what she was looking at. "That is not me," I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. "I don't know who that is, but it is not me." Danielle tilted her head. "Sarah," she said, "we can all see the video." "It is not me," I said again, louder this time. "I don't know that man. I have never been to that hotel. Whoever that woman is, she is not me." But the room had already shifted. I could feel it. The way people were looking at me had changed. Even people I had considered at least neutral, at least polite, they were looking at me with something new in their eyes. Doubt. Distance. My mother-in-law stood up slowly from her chair. She walked around the table toward my husband, and she placed her hand on his arm with a kind of practiced sorrow that made my skin crawl. "I know this is hard," she said to him. "But you needed to know." My husband had not moved. He was still looking at the screen, which had gone dark again. His jaw was tight. His hands were flat on the table. "That is not Sarah," he said. His mother's expression shifted. "Sweetheart." I said, "That is not Sarah." His voice did not rise. It did not shake. It simply landed the way something heavy lands, with a finality that stopped everyone from speaking for a moment. Danielle pulled up another image on her phone. "I have more," she said. "And a witness." "A witness," my husband repeated. He finally looked at his sister. Something in his face that had been composed started to harden into something else entirely. "You have a witness. Someone who saw them together. More than once." I was shaking. I couldn't stop it. I pressed my hands flat against my thighs under the table and tried to breathe, but the air in that room felt like it was disappearing. I could feel everyone looking at me. I could feel the weight of their collective certainty pressing against my chest. "This is not real," I said, and my voice cracked on the last word, and I hated it for cracking because I knew how it sounded. I knew that a voice cracking at exactly that moment, in exactly that way, would only make people more certain of something that wasn't true. My mother-in-law turned to my husband and said something I will not repeat in full because it was one of the cruelest things anyone has ever said to me indirectly. She told him that she had always worried, that she had tried to give me the benefit of the doubt, that she hoped she was wrong, but this was exactly why a person's background mattered when choosing a life partner, that people showed you who they were eventually. Every single word was a door closing. My husband's uncle said he thought my husband should take some time to think carefully. His cousin said the evidence looked pretty clear. His father, the birthday man himself, sat at the head of the table with his eyes down and said nothing at all. I looked at my husband. He was the only person in that room I had any hope left in, and I knew it, and I think he knew it too. He looked at me for a long moment. And then he said to everyone at the table, very quietly, "We're leaving." His mother said his name like a warning. "We are leaving," he said again. He stood up, held out his hand to me, and when I took it, he held it the way you hold something you are not going to let go of. We walked out of that restaurant without another word to anyone. In the car, I fell apart completely. I told him everything, which was nothing, because there was nothing to tell, but I told him anyway. I told him I had no idea who that woman was. I told him I had never been to that hotel. I told him I would do anything, take any test, answer any question, go anywhere he needed me to go to prove that video was not real. He waited until I finished. Then he said, "I know it's not real." I looked at him. "How can you be sure?" He kept his eyes on the road. "Because 6 weeks ago, on the date Danielle said that video was taken, you and I were in Portland visiting your parents. I have the hotel receipts. I have photos on my phone. I have a memory of you falling asleep on my shoulder on the flight home." He paused. "I know exactly where you were." I didn't say anything for a long time. I just looked at him and tried to understand how it was possible to love a person that much. "This isn't over," he said. "Someone made that video. And I need to know who and why." He did not rest for the next 2 weeks. I watched him come home from work, change out of his work clothes, and sit at his desk until midnight going through everything. He hired someone, a private investigator with a background in digital forensics, to analyze the video. He pulled security footage from the hotel. He traced the metadata on the file Danielle had sent to a family group chat later that night, apparently not realizing that digital files carry information about when and where they were created. And then he found him. A man named Carter Webb. 28 years old, he did contract work in video production and digital media. And he had a record of small-scale fraud, nothing major, but a pattern. He was not hard to find once you knew what you were looking for. My husband went to see him. I don't know exactly what was said in that room, but I know my husband brought the forensics report, the contradicting hotel records, and the metadata trail. I know that Carter Webb, when presented with evidence that the scheme had already unraveled, did not try very hard to protect anyone. He told my husband that he had been hired to produce a convincing video using existing footage, a woman who resembled me, and a carefully constructed timeline. He told my husband the amount he had been paid, and he told my husband who had paid him. It was my mother-in-law. Not Danielle acting alone, not some spontaneous decision made by a jealous sister-in-law. My mother-in-law had been the one to find Carter Webb. My mother-in-law had been the one to provide the details: my appearance, my general schedule, the name of the hotel she thought would be believable. And my mother-in-law had been the one to decide that her son's 65th birthday party for his father was the right moment to deploy it, because the entire family would be there and the pressure would be maximum. She had planned it for months. When my husband came home that night and told me, I sat on the kitchen floor. Not because my legs gave out, but because sitting on the floor was the only thing that felt honest in that moment. I sat on the floor and I said nothing for a long time, and my husband sat down next to me, and we stayed there in silence for a while. Finally, he said, "I have to talk to them." I looked at him. "What are you going to do?" He thought for a moment. "I'm going to tell them the truth. And then I'm going to tell them what it cost." A few days later, we drove to his parents' house. I held his hand in the car. He hadn't called ahead. He hadn't warned anyone. He had simply decided. When we walked in, his mother and father were in the living room. Danielle was there too, which I think surprised even my husband slightly. Maybe she had been expecting this. Maybe she had been waiting to see how it ended. My mother-in-law's expression when she saw me walk through the door was something I will carry with me for a long time. It was not guilt. It was not fear. It was irritation. Like I was a problem that had refused to be solved. My husband stood in the center of the room and laid out everything. The forensics report, the metadata, Carter Webb's confession, the contradicting travel records, the receipts, the photos from Portland. Everything, methodically, calmly, like someone presenting evidence in a room where the verdict had already been decided and all that was left was the record. His mother interrupted twice. The first time to say that she didn't know what he was talking about, the second time to say that she had only ever done what she thought was best for him. His father said nothing. Danielle looked at the floor. When my husband finished, the room was very quiet. Then his mother said, "You don't understand the kind of future you're throwing away. I just wanted more for you." Is that really so terrible, to want the best for your child? My husband looked at her for a long time. And when he spoke, his voice was the saddest I had ever heard it. "You almost cost me my wife," he said. "You almost cost me my child. And here I want to stop and tell you something I have not mentioned yet. I was 8 weeks pregnant at the time. We had told no one. We had been waiting for the right moment. You did not do this for me," he continued. "You did this because you never accepted the choice I made. And you thought if you took her away, I would eventually make a different one." His mother's face crumpled. "That's not." "It is," he said. "And I think you know it." His father finally looked up. He started to say something. I think he was going to try to broker some kind of peace, some kind of let's all calm down and move forward, but my husband shook his head. "I am not here to argue," he said. "I am here because you deserve to hear this directly, In person, from me, not over the phone. Not in a letter. He paused. But I need you to understand that what was done here is not something I am able to move past. Not right now. Maybe not for a long time. His mother started crying. Real crying, not the practiced kind. And I want to be honest. Some part of me felt something for her in that moment, some small and complicated thing, because she was a person who had made a devastating mistake out of a love that had curdled into control. That does not excuse it, but it is the truth of what I felt. My husband turned to Danielle. He looked at her for a moment without speaking. Then he simply said, "I hope you think about your role in this." She didn't answer. She just kept looking at the floor. We left without any dramatic final words. There was no slammed door, no ultimatum delivered in a raised voice. My husband simply held my hand, walked out of his childhood home, got into the car, and drove. About a mile from the house, he pulled into the parking lot of a gas station and stopped the car. He sat there for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel. "Are you okay?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "I feel like I just buried something." "I know," I said. He looked at me. "I'm not sorry I did it. I know that too." He reached over and took my hand. We sat there for a few minutes in that parking lot, not saying anything, just being two people who had been through something together and had come out the other side still holding on to each other. The weeks that followed were quiet in the way that follows a storm. His parents did not call. Danielle sent one text message that said, "Only I'm sorry." My husband read it and didn't respond. We found a new rhythm. A smaller, quieter life that turned out to feel more like ours than the version we had been living before. We told my parents about the pregnancy. My mother cried for 20 minutes and then immediately started talking about names. My father shook my husband's hand in that way he has, slow and serious, where you can tell he means every ounce of it. 6 months later, my mother-in-law sent a letter. A real letter, handwritten, 3 pages. I will not share everything she said because some of it is between our families. But she acknowledged what she had done. She used the word unforgivable, which I thought took courage, because most people avoid words they cannot take back. She said she understood if we needed distance. She said she would wait. My husband read the letter twice. Then he folded it carefully and set it on the desk in our home office, where it still sits. We have not responded yet. We may not for some time. There is a baby coming and a life being built, and right now we are focused on those things. But I think about what he said in that gas station parking lot sometimes, that he felt like he had buried something. I think what he buried was a version of his family that was never really real, the idea that love and loyalty meant the same thing, that the people who raised you would never deliberately hurt the person you chose. Burying that is its own kind of grief, even when it's the right thing to do. What I know, sitting here now, is this. The night my sister-in-law pressed play on that video, she thought she was ending my marriage. She thought she was handing my mother-in-law exactly what she had been trying to arrange for years. Instead, what happened was that my husband stood up in front of his entire family, took my hand, and walked out of that restaurant with me. And every day since then, he has shown me that a person's loyalty is not defined by who they grew up with. It is defined by who they choose to stay for. He chose me. He kept choosing me. And that has made all the difference. If you are out there right now feeling like you don't belong in the life you've built, like there are people around you waiting for you to fail, I want you to know that the right person will never make you feel that way. And if you are lucky enough to find someone who takes your hand and walks out the door with you, hold on. Don't let go.